decomposed body of an unidentified African-American woman was found in a wooded area.
We have another victim.
The body was placed under a dead-end sign.
She did not deserve that.
On the 27th of May, 2004, the lifeless and incomplete body of Donna Bennett Johnston, a 43-year-old mother and sex worker, was found in a drainage canal.
In this drainage canal, a woman who lives nearby didn't want to talk on camera, but she tells me a little girl found the body, went home to tell her parents, who then called police. She says the victim was a white male, heavyset, with dark hair.
Not far from the house of her killer, Sean Vincent, who allegedly didn't only beat her to death, but also ate a piece of her raw flesh and sexually assaulted her corpse. The case of Donna Bennett Johnston opened up the door to 7 unsolved murders in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Crimes that were committed by Sean Vincent Gillis, a disturbed man whose life had been on a circle of rejection, abuse, lies, pornographic addiction, irresponsibility, and aggravating murders. Born on June 24, 1962 in Baton Rouge, Sean Vincent was raised in southern Louisiana. He was the son of Yvonne and Norman Gillis. Sean was raised only by his mother and paternal grandparents after his father abandoned the family when Sean was still a toddler. Sean's father, Norman Gillis, was an alcoholic and cared less about his family and more about his bottles. He once pointed a gun at Sean when he was a kid, threatening to kill the toddler if he made a move. Norman was, however, stopped by his wife Yvonne, who reported to the authorities and had him kept in a psychiatric hospital. Although he never went back to his family, his abuse left a lasting impact on Sean. Yvonne Gillis, on the other hand, was Sean's guardian angel. She was intentional about her child and worked really hard to provide for him. Sean Vincent grew up like every normal child. He had enough to feed and went to a good school. He was healthy and looked normal, but sadly, he had an unusual character. He liked funeral homes and would often break into the buildings while trying to fit in different coffins. He wasn't alone though. His best friends, John Green and John Rosas, were his companions. As the trio got older, they developed more interest in devil worship. They would often sneak out to watch Satanists practice their rituals. These acts often scared and amazed them as they all loved it. When Sean grew older, he requested to meet with his father, which he did. He was, however, disappointed after he found his father's gay porn collection weeks after they reunited. Irritated by it all, he left. He never went back to his dad, but the experience planted more seeds of anger and frustration in the almost damaged Sean. Sean Vincent was only 17 years old when he was first arrested, although for minor crimes like traffic citations, DUI, and possession of marijuana. But these were just the tip of the iceberg, as he was preparing himself for a life of crime. After Sean's graduation, he decided to please his tired mother by working at a store, but he only lasted for a few weeks. Sean Vincent wasn't the work type. He hated anything that required labor, so he spent more time searching for entertainment on his computer. At first, it was all video games and comedy, but then he discovered adult entertainment, and in no time, he got addicted to it, especially websites that featured forced situations. Coupled with his prior love for dark events, Sean was fast becoming a monster. Sean loved his new life. He was okay, and he became even more comfortable when his mother opted to move out. In 1992, 12 years after his new discovery, Sean's mother Yvonne moved to Georgia for her new job. Before she left, she asked Sean to come with her so they could both start a new life, but he refused. He had always had his way with her, and this time was no different. Besides, he was a 30-year-old grown man. She, however, promised to keep paying the house mortgage and other bills to ensure Sean was comfortable. Sean had more time to himself, maybe too much time. He continued soaking himself in adult entertainment and other dark materials online, and soon he started behaving in strange ways. First, he was caught watching a woman from her bedroom window, and then in the middle of the night, he would be heard making strange noises. He was generally known as an odd guy, and the sight of him terrified women and young girls. In 1994, a mutual friend introduced Sean Vincent to Terry Le Moyne, a mature woman who had been divorced quite a number of times. Surprisingly, the both of them immediately hit it off. Terry thought he was nice and loving. They both loved science fiction, specifically Star Trek, and they also loved collecting things. Terry actually thought he was as cute as a teddy bear. She described him as the type of guy you bring back home to meet your mom. She claimed Sean was the best boyfriend as he was always considerate, attentive, and loving. Due to her failed past relationship life, Terry was dedicated to making her relationship with Sean work, and it did, at least for 9 years. She often overlooked Sean's numerous flaws, which included his little appetite for being intimate with her, his drinking habit, and his obsession with adult entertainment. She wanted him to stop, but didn't want to force it either. Terry would always go to bed alone and wake up alone, meeting Sean in front of his computer. She knew if he was a little bit busy with something else, the change could start from there, but Sean was far gone and he wasn't interested in seeking help. Terry, however, kept on trying to convince Sean to get a job at the convenience store she worked at. To Sean, having a job was unnecessary and uncalled for. He was okay. His mom paid the bills, so he didn't have to worry. Although, after much persistence from Terry, he decided to give it a try. But like his former job, he only worked for 3 weeks before he quit. When he quit, he went back into what he called his own type of life. Terry wasn't happy about this, but because she had fears of losing the relationship, she decided not to say anything about it and instead focused on how she could make it work. The freedom Sean was having wasn't doing him much good, as he eventually gave in to his deepest desire: murder. In 1994, Sean Vincent committed what was his first known murder. Sean monitored the happenings that went on in the home of 82-year-old Ann Bryan. He understood the time she was alone, and one early morning around 3 a.m., he got his opportunity. Just after Ann Bryan's regular evening routine, she left her door unlocked so her caretaker could come in the next morning without interrupting her sleep. Sean knew he had his chance, and he took it. He snuck into the house with the motive of having his way with her, but she screamed just after Sean touched her. At that point, Sean was frightened. He didn't want her to alert the neighbors, so he thought of how to make her silent, and the only way he thought to do that was to slit her throat and stab her an unhealthy number of times. Sean stabbed Ann Bryan 50 times before leaving her decapitated body at her residence. She was found the next morning by her caregiver, who immediately called the police. What was crazy was, after investigations, there were no clues found. No suspects, no eyewitnesses, nothing. Sean was happy he got away with it. He became even more confident. Although he didn't commit any sort of crime for the next 5 years, what he did to Ann Bryan left a soothing impression on him. He loved the fact that she was quiet after the murder. She was just there. He could easily have his way with her just being quiet and still. To Terry, the murder of Ann Bryan was just too close since her workplace was located just opposite Ann Bryan's home. The same place that Sean quit from. What she didn't know was how close she was to the murderer. During that space of 5 years, Terry moved in with Sean and the two were all in about themselves. Sean didn't commit any murder during this time because his love for Terry kept him in check, but then, for how long? Sean couldn't deny that he craved another opportunity. He was now in love with the silence and free access that came with dead women. He concluded that it would be in silence that he would commit his worst acts to come. According to one of his later confessions, he tried so hard to seal and overcome the temptation he had, but he couldn't as he saw more opportunities to exercise his desires. On the 4th of January 1999, Sean did it again, this time with a younger woman named Catherine Ann Hall, a 29-year-old sex worker who willingly got into Sean's car for business but met her end. Sean had learned more over those 5 years and had also developed his own kind of murder tool. His favorite was his objectifier, a white nylon zip tie that was roughly 2.5 feet long. He loved it so much because it would turn his victims from being a woman to an object that he could later deal with. Catherine, of course, didn't know the trouble she was about to get into, so when she got into his car, she began immediately. But just when she was performing a certain act on Sean, he attempted to strangle her with his objectifier. She tried to fight back, but Sean overpowered her. After which, he stabbed her 16 times before intimately violating her corpse and then mutilating her body. When Sean was done, he headed to the Splash Car Wash to clean evidence off his car. During the process, he took Catherine out of the vehicle and laid her naked body on the ground. It was so dark nobody saw anything. Sean later dumped Catherine's naked body on a rural road just under a dead-end sign where a hunter later found her. During the autopsy, pubic hair was found in Catherine's mouth, which would later be tested for DNA.
In Catherine Hall's mouth, there was found a pubic hair, and what made that hair very unique was that it had a root attached to it.
After the murder, Terry became even more uneasy. These were just too close to her. Her worry doubled when she developed a grand mal seizure, which left her unable to drive. She had to rely on Sean to drop her off and pick her up from work every day. Sean had no problem with it. He claimed he loved her, so he had to show it. He was okay with the task. After dropping Terry off, he would often cruise around town before going back home to face his computer. It was during these cruises that he spotted yet another woman who was going to be his third victim. He had his eyes on the 52-year-old jogger and mother Hardy Schmidt. He stalked her for 3 weeks during her morning jogs, and on the 30th of May 1999, he struck. Just around 6:30 a.m. that morning, Sean ran Hardy down with his car, knocked her into a ditch, and hurriedly rushed out of his car to strangle her. He strangled her, but purposely not enough to kill her. He then dragged her into his vehicle and drove off to a nearby park where he intimately violated and murdered her. After mutilating her body, he dumped her naked body in his trunk and drove home. Sticking to his everyday routine, the next night he went to pick Terry up after her shift had ended. He chatted and laughed with Terry like he had nothing to hide, but Terry on the other hand complained about a strong odor in his car. Sean was smart. He had been able to hide his deeds from the person he saw every day, so a quick convincing excuse wasn't difficult. He brushed it off, claiming he had hit and run over an animal recently and he was going to clean the car as soon as possible. Terry had no idea that the animal he spoke about was in fact a human who was just lying there behind her. She didn't think much about it, so it passed. It wasn't until the 1st of June that the body of Hardy was found by a cyclist on the highway in St. James Parish Bayou. At first, just after Hardy's disappearance, her husband was a suspect, but things later changed when the DNA in Hardy's corpse proved otherwise. Sean is crazy. He loves and enjoys each kill. With every kill came a lesser resting period before the next hunt. For the first, it was 5 years. The second was 4 months, and for Hardy, just 2 to 3 months, and he was already hunting for his next victim. Unfortunately, he found one 5 months later. 36-year-old Joyce Williams was his next victim, and what he did with her body was even worse than the others. Sean Vincent loved Joyce's legs, and he wanted them, so on November 12, 1999, he picked Joyce up at Scotlandville, drove her across the Mississippi River, and took her out to a sugarcane field near Port Allen where he strangled her with the objectifier. Usually, he would intimately violate her and dump her off somewhere, but Sean did it differently this time. He took the deceased victim's body back home and basically autopsied it in the kitchen where he and Terry usually prepared dinner. Firstly, he intimately violated Joyce's body, then he used a hacksaw to sever one of her legs as a souvenir to remember her. He then decapitated her body and ate some of it. When he was done, he stuffed her remains in a bag and carried it to his car. Somehow, Sean managed to clean up the place before picking Terry up from work. It was either he was very good at telling lies, or Terry wasn't just observant because she suspected nothing when he dropped her off at home and quickly drove off to go dump the body. Whatever it was, Joyce was dead, and it took a couple of months for her remains to be found. The badly bantered body of Joyce was found in a wooded area in Iberville, Paris. Later on, after his arrest, Sean would go on to brag about how he manhandled Joyce and how cutting off her legs and slitting her throat were like cutting butter to him. Yeah, he was that crazy. Sean wasn't done though. He craved more, and in January 2000, barely 2 months after he murdered Joyce, he got another victim. This time, he killed 52-year-old sex worker Lillian Robinson. He used the same tool, the objectifier, to end her life, and just like the previous victim, when he was done killing her, he took her home. Only he didn't have time on his side before Terry would finish her shift. He couldn't mess with her corpse the way he did with Joyce, but he, however, intimately violated her corpse and dumped her body. A month later, a fisherman discovered her body near Whiskey Bay. It's crazy as to why Terry didn't suspect or notice any of Sean's odd behavior. Sean was dangerous, and it's unclear why he wasn't with her. The monster in Sean came up again, and on October 20th, 2000, he decided to add another name to his list. 38-year-old Marilyn Nevels was abducted by Sean near Lafayette, and although she tried escaping, he caught her for the second time. Sean beat her to death with a steel rod, after which he dumped her body on a Mississippi River levee near Baton Rouge. Marilyn's decomposing body was found on Halloween. After Sean killed Marilyn, he went on to observe his usual break before leeching on to the next prey, but this time, something unusual was happening. More bodies had been found, and it was all over the news, but Sean knew he wasn't responsible for them. At that point, Sean knew he had competition, and that was when he started using his computer for something else rather than adult entertainment and bad tutorials on how to decapitate a human. Sean started keeping records of these murders. He wanted to know who was trying to take the spotlight from his unidentified self. The murders were getting too much, and oftentimes there were no trails left. They were always unsolved. It was a trying time for the police force, as they knew they needed to up their game if they wanted to catch the Baton Rouge murderer. In August 2002, a task force just to catch the bad guy, or rather guys, was formed. They thought they were getting close when a profiler told them to look for a white male, someone who was raised by a single parent and loves knives, someone who is crazy enough to be aroused by killing. The unknown left citizens afraid and authorities worried. Things appeared to change when the DNA was found in the body of a victim, Tranisha Dean Collum, linked to a group of other murders, and in May 2003, police caught and arrested a 34-year-old black man named Derek Todd Lee for all the crimes. Everyone was at ease and the media praised the police for a job well done, but little did they know that it was far from over as another monster was out on the loose. After the arrest of Derek, Sean Vincent became infatuated with his competitor. He even created a special file on his computer labeled DTL, which stands for Derek Todd Lee. He kept collecting news articles, photos, and information about Derek's crimes. He loved how Derek committed a crime, taunted the police, and always escaped justice. To Sean, he'd learned a new trick. All these happened under Terry's nose, and she never suspected or noticed anything odd. Even when she found out that Sean was putting a lot of miles on the car and he was always out, she simply rolled it off as him cheating on her. In October 2003, he murdered yet another woman. This time it was no stranger. Johnny Mae Williams has been friends with Sean for over 10 years. She was a sex worker and a divorced mother of 3. Johnny didn't think it odd when Sean invited her. She had partied with Sean so many times before, so she had no caution. Sean drove Johnny to a secluded area where he brutally beat and intimately violated her before strangling and stabbing her to death. Sean then cut her legs open on the front and back. He then arranged her body in different ways, taking pictures before dumping her mutilated body in a field behind a restaurant. Her body was later found by the cops. Her hands were missing, but they found a hair in her bone which helped them narrow down their search to a white male. Just like his other crimes, Sean Vincent wasn't apprehended. He still went on to commit another murder, one that would ultimately lead to his arrest. On February 26, 2004, Sean picked up a drunk 43-year-old mother and sex worker, Donna Bennett Johnston. He drove her to a drainage canal not far from his home and strangled his victim Donna to death. Donna tried fighting off her attacker but couldn't succeed as he overpowered her. He then cut her really badly and even ate some of her parts. He likes human souvenirs, so he took one of her arms home before dumping her in the drainage canal. Her body was found the next day. Donna's case was not only Sean's most gruesome, it was also his last. Investigators found fresh tire tracks just close to the drainage canal, tracks which helped their quest to apprehend the culprit. Armed with photos of the crime scene and the fresh tracks, investigators immediately contacted the Good Tire Company to find out what type of vehicles would use those types of tires. It turned out to be a white Chevrolet Cavalier, and only 90 people in Baton Rouge had ever purchased that tire. This meant the cops were close. Officers were tasked with locating and interviewing every name on the tire list while gathering DNA in the process. The police already had DNA evidence from Catherine Hall, Johnny Mae Williams, and beneath the finger of Donna Johnston, who tried to fight off her attacker, but they all didn't match any DNA in their system. They hoped the tracks would help find the one responsible for all the murders, and luckily it did. Sean Vincent Gillis was the 26th person on the list. He didn't have a criminal record, so he wasn't initially a suspect, but then he implicated himself by making suspicious statements.
We talked about the location where Miss Johnson's body was located. Mr. Gillis tells me that he had been in that area.
He admitted that Johnny was a very close friend of his, and she even got into his car. He was asked if he would like to go down to the station for a friendly chat. He accepted and even gave the go-ahead for a recorded interview after telling the cops that he was in fact present at the crime scene. He claimed he needed to go pee after he had some bottles of beer, so he made his way to the field. When asked if Johnny's blood would be seen in his car, Sean accepted and said she was on her period, and for an excuse on how her blood ended up in the back seat, Sean claimed the wind caused it. At that point, it was clear the Baton Rouge killer was found, but more evidence was needed. The lead investigator, Brian White, left the room and immediately ordered a search warrant for Sean's home and a DNA test from a cheek swab they took from Sean. Sean was allowed to go home, and the long hours wait began. Finally, with the help of a SWAT team, Sean Vincent Gillis was arrested on the 29th of April 2004 at exactly 1:20 a.m. When the force barged into his home, Terry was terrified, unsure of what was going on until a police officer asked her, "Do you know you have been living with a serial killer?" She laughed at first, but was shocked when Sean confirmed it. After his arrest, Sean admitted to killing 8 people, going on to brag about how he committed the crime and what weapon he used. The police found Sean's collection of weapons, including 7 saws, a hacksaw, a machete, knives, a 14-inch bayonet, and the zip ties. They also took into evidence different computers and photographs of Johnny Mae Williams' body and other photographs too, one of which captured the victim at the trunk of Sean's car. His plate number was visible too. They also saw articles on Derek Todd Lee's crimes and even files that contained robbery, attacks, murder, and so much dark information. The police also got hold of the different body parts Sean kept in his home and trunk. Sean was exposed. He couldn't deny it. He was about to be served justice. A friend of Donna Bennett Johnston, Temmie, wrote to Sean regarding what he did to her friend, and Sean replied back with details of how he decapitated the body of Johnny. Although Temmie died in 2005, she sent out the letters to the authorities, and this put a conclusion on Sean's case. On July 21, 2008, Sean was sentenced to life in imprisonment without the possibility of parole 3 times. In the previous year, he got another sentence after he pleaded guilty to the murder of Joyce Williams. Sean lives his pitiful life in the Louisiana State Penitentiary in isolation for his safety and the safety of other inmates. He's now over 60 years old and still breathes the air he snatched from his victims in the most gruesome ways. Thank you for watching today's video. Be careful out there, guys. Stay safe. Like the video and subscribe to the channel for more. See you in our next video. Bye.